Hello America, and hello baseball fans. What you're looking at is a new logo representing the continuation of the history of African American baseball by way of a great American effort called the Big Experiment 2, the return of Negro baseball. New Negro, RNBI. RNBI stands for Returning Negro Baseball to Inner City. This is a YouTube self-broadcast about a documentary of a historical pictorial museum that tells a story about the history of African American baseball. This is a video documentary produced by Thomas M. English, co-produced by Robert W. English. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the history of African American baseball. African American baseball goes back as far as ancient Egypt. In the beginning, the stick and ball game, which here in America is known as baseball, was first played as far back as in the early days of ancient Egypt. This pictorial here begins the story about the history of African American baseball going back to 1846. Between 1846 and 1865, the definition of African Americans playing the game of baseball was called blackball. During that time, there were only two teams playing this game, the Weeksville of New York and the Colored Union Club. From 1846 to 1865, it was called blackball. From 1865 to 1920, the definition of African Americans that played the game of baseball was called post-Civil War colored baseball. During this time, in the 1860s, the first African American to cross the color line was the first African American paid professional, a 14-year-old boy named John Fowler, also known as Bud. In the mid-1880s, the first African American to cross the color line in Major League Baseball history was a man named Moses Fleetwood Walker. The day that he walked out on the field, the 7 forbidden words never to be spoken in the game of baseball was spoken. "Hey, get that nigger off the field!" And from that day on, the gentleman's agreement was born, making an announcement that no whites would play with any blacks, Asians, Indians, or any other people of color except for fair-skinned Latinos. 2 years later, the most feared baseball team in America was born. The most feared baseball team had two nicknames, the Boys from Babylon and the Monarchs of the Diamond. This great, powerful, and mighty baseball team was called the Cuban Giants, even though there were African American men that had to pose as Hispanic Latinos in order to continue to play the game of baseball, as well as continue the history of African American baseball. The definition from 1920 to 1960, the definition of African Americans playing the game of baseball was called Negro baseball, thanks to the father of Negro baseball, Andrew Root Foster. His reign lasted 10 years, from 1920 to 1930, and in 1933, from 1933 to 1963, the definition of African Americans playing the game of baseball was called New Negro baseball, thanks to a man named Gus Greenlee. This historical pictorial, is where I come in, Thomas English. Now this unique story tells a story about a little boy that wanted to be as Jackie Robinson during the Black History celebration in February of 1998. In 1999, on August 20th, 1999, the former Tampa Bay Devil Rays hosted a salute to the Negro Leagues. and the great John Buck O'Neill come down and other Tampa Bay legends to witness the historical pictorial that told the story about the history of African American baseball. 12 wall murals on 8 buildings within 10 blocks of the 16th Street Business District in St. Petersburg, Florida. Once Buck O'Neill saw what I have done, he passed the torch on to me to continue the history of African American baseball. And on February 12, 2000, in James Oliver Field in Campbell Park in St. Petersburg, Florida, I hosted the first Florida State Tampa Bay Negro Baseball Series since 1960, a series between the St. Petersburg Pelicans and the Tampa Black Smokers. These are just some of the uniforms that were worn during that time in 2000 and 2001. The St. Petersburg Pelicans, the Tampa Black Smokers, as well as the Negro Baseball All-Stars from that era. What you see here is a pictorial that tells the story about the history of African American baseball in Louisville, Kentucky, bringing up the next generation of African American baseball players, as well as multicultural and co-ed players. This new era is called New Negro RNBI, returning Negro baseball to inner cities. There are more YouTube broadcasts coming, but this is just to document a historical pictorial that tells the story about the history of African American baseball, produced by Thomas M. English. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Negro baseball is back.